They called it the safest facility in the state, a place where the worst of humanity was buried behind concrete and steel. But inside those walls, justice had its own predators. What happened next was never supposed to see daylight. This is inside prison walls, the harsh truth they don't want you to see. The night the gates went silent. The first sign that something was wrong came just after 2:14 a.m. at Blackridge Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison tucked deep in the Montana wilderness. A place built to contain killers, gang leaders, and men society had long given up on. Officer Daniel Reese had worked there for 15 years. He'd heard every scream, every lie, every whispered confession between bars. But that night, what he heard wasn't human. It was silence. No footsteps. No echo of the night guards making rounds. Even the usual hum of the security gate buzzers had gone dead. Then came the flicker, the lights dimming, just for a second, before the entire east block was swallowed in darkness. At 2:18 a.m., the control room cameras began glitching. One by one, the live feeds turned to static. Reese reached for his radio. No response. He checked the monitors again, and froze. Cell 204. Inmate, Marcus Venett. Convicted of triple homicide. A man who swore he'd never see the outside again. But now, his cell door was open. Reese sounded the alarm manually, slamming his fist on the emergency panel. Red strobes filled the hallways, and the sirens wailed. But the west gate didn't lock. Somehow, it stayed green. Within minutes, the warden was on site. Warden Hale was a former Marine, stone-faced, meticulous, the kind of man who believed in order above all. He ordered a full lockdown. But when his officers swept the east block, they didn't find Marcus Venett. They found something else. Blood, just a single trail of it, streaking across the floor toward the laundry tunnels. The tunnels weren't on any official map. They were remnants of an old drainage system, sealed decades ago. Or so everyone thought. Reese and two other guards followed the trail with flashlights, each step echoing through the damp concrete. Then, the smell hit them. Metallic. Thick. The trail ended at a rusted door, half covered in mold. Reese tried the handle, it turned. Inside was a narrow passage, lined with pipes and faded warning signs. At the far end, something glinted under the light. A piece of torn uniform fabric, guard issue. Not inmate. Reese's pulse spiked. Someone helped him, he whispered. The warden refused to believe it. He blamed the system glitch, the storm that had rolled in, anything but the idea that one of his own men had betrayed him. But the deeper they dug, the worse it got. A full audit revealed that two guards, Officer Millen and Officer Pratt, hadn't clocked out that night. Their vehicles were still in the lot, but they were nowhere to be found. And in the security booth near the main gate, investigators found a small, burnt USB drive. It was melted into the floor, as if someone had tried to destroy it in a hurry. By dawn, the media was circling outside the facility. Escape at Blackridge, the headlines read. Authorities confirm missing inmate. But inside, Reese couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't an escape at all. It was a trade. Marcus Venett was no ordinary prisoner. Before his arrest, he'd been part of an underground network, contract killers who took orders through encrypted channels. He was known as the broker, a man who arranged assassinations for cash, never touching the weapon himself. His testimony could have exposed people far beyond prison walls. Politicians. CEOs. Even law enforcement. The FBI took over within 24 hours. They questioned everyone, guards, kitchen staff, even maintenance. But something strange happened. When they tried to pull the surveillance data from the previous week, the prison's digital archive had been wiped clean. All of it. Files. Footage. Logs. Gone. Reese was called in for questioning. They asked if he'd seen anyone acting strange. He mentioned the new IT contractor, a quiet guy who'd been in and out of the control room for days before the incident. The name on his ID was E. Carver. When agents ran the name through their system, it didn't exist. No record. No tax ID. No address. And then came the first body. Officer Pratt was found 3 miles from the facility, floating in a drainage canal. His wrists were zip-tied, his throat slit. In his pocket was a folded piece of paper with one line written in black ink. "You can't cage what built the cage." Reese stared at the words as they bagged the evidence. Something about it felt deliberate, like a message, not a threat. By the end of that week, every news outlet in the country was talking about Blackridge. Politicians called it a massive security failure. The Bureau called it an internal conspiracy. But for the people inside that prison, it was something else entirely. A reckoning. Because someone had opened those gates not for freedom, but for revenge. And when Officer Reese returned to his locker 2 nights later, he found an unmarked envelope waiting for him. No name. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. He plugged it into his home computer. The screen went black, then a single video file appeared. The timestamp read, 2:09 a.m., 5 minutes before the lights went out. In the footage, Reese saw something that made his stomach drop. Marcus Venet standing outside his cell. Calm. Smirking. Behind him, someone in a guard's uniform, scanning an access card. But the face under the cap wasn't Officer Pratt. It was someone Reese had known for years. Someone who was supposed to be dead. The man who shouldn't exist. Officer Daniel Reese couldn't move. The man on his computer screen, standing in that cell beside Marcus Venet, was Officer Ben Caro. Caro had been Reese's partner for nearly a decade, sharp, reliable, the kind of man who never bent the rules. But 4 years ago, during a prisoner transfer ambush, Caro was pronounced dead. His patrol van was found torched, his body supposedly burned beyond recognition. Now, here he was. Alive. Helping a convicted killer walk free. Reese sat in the glow of the monitor, the cursor blinking over that frozen frame of Caro's face. His pulse hammered in his ears. He played the footage again. The angle was grainy, the lighting poor, but there was no mistaking the smirk, the small scar near the temple, or the way Caro tilted his head just before scanning his access badge. The badge number matched Reese's own unit. Someone had used his credentials. He backed away from the desk, breathing heavy. If this was real, it meant someone on the inside had faked a death, stolen identities, and orchestrated an escape from one of the most secure prisons in the country. And if Caro was alive, it wasn't by accident. The next morning, Reese drove to the prison before sunrise. He didn't tell anyone about the flash drive, not yet. He needed answers before the bureau got involved again. Inside the warden's office, the air was thick with tension. 2 agents in dark suits were already there, talking quietly with Warden Hale. The room fell silent when Reese entered. "Officer Reese," one agent said. "We need to speak privately." The agents identified themselves as part of a joint federal task force investigating Operation Downline, a corruption probe linked to organized crime inside U.S. prisons. According to them, someone had been using correctional facilities to launder money and move encrypted data through inmate networks. Blackridge wasn't just a prison, it was a communications hub. The name Marcus Venet had come up repeatedly in coded messages between several incarcerated crime lords. But what caught the Bureau's attention wasn't the name. It was the list attached to it. A list of 21 names, judges, corporate lawyers, and law enforcement officers. And next to those names, one stood out, Benjamin Caro. Reese's stomach twisted. "How does a dead officer end up on your list?" he asked. The agent didn't blink. "That's what we're trying to find out." That evening, Reese drove to Caro's old home address, a rural property outside Helena that had been sold years ago. The house stood abandoned, windows shattered, roof sagging. But the mailbox still bore the faded letters, CARROW. He parked a few yards away, flashlight in hand. The front door creaked open with a push. Inside, dust coated everything, except for one table in the living room. There was a laptop. And it was still warm. Reese's heart raced. Someone had been there minutes ago. Before he could react, a voice came from behind him. "Been a while, Danny." Reese turned slowly. There, standing in the doorway, was Ben Caro. Older, thinner, his face lined with scars, but unmistakably alive. He held no weapon, just a small drive between his fingers. "You shouldn't have come," Caro said quietly. Reese's voice trembled. "You died. I saw the reports. The photos." Caro nodded. "That's what they wanted you to see." They sat at the old table, the air heavy with mildew and memories. Caro slid the drive across to him. "What's on this," he said, "is the real reason Blackridge exists." He explained that after the ambush years ago, he discovered evidence of a secret contract between prison officials and a private defense firm. The firm had been using select inmates for covert operations, illegally testing surveillance technology, laundering funds, and carrying out assignments under the guise of rehabilitation projects. When Caro found out, he was marked. The ambush wasn't a random attack, it was a cleanup. He survived by pure luck, went off-grid, and spent years tracing the people behind it. Then he found Venet. Marcus Venet wasn't a killer for hire. He was an accountant for the operation, one who'd stumbled across the offshore ledgers and started keeping copies. When the Bureau caught him, they thought he was just another criminal. But he had the keys to billions in dirty money. "Someone inside the system needed him free," Caro said. "And they needed me to make it look like an escape." Reese's head spun. "You're saying this goes above the Warden? Above the Bureau?" Caro nodded slowly. "You have no idea how high this goes." Before Reese could ask more, headlights swept across the window. An SUV pulled into the driveway, its beams cutting through the dark. Caro's expression hardened. "They found us," he whispered. He shoved the drive into Reese's hand. "There's an address on it. Montana Route 8, mile marker 42. Get there before midnight. Don't trust anyone wearing a badge. The first bullet shattered the front window. Reese dropped to the floor as Caro returned fire, yelling for him to go. Ben! Reese shouted. But Caro was already at the door, covering him as he sprinted to the back exit. The night exploded with gunfire. Reese dove into the woods, the sound of engines roaring behind him. He didn't look back, not when he heard Caro's weapon go silent, not when the house went up in flames. He kept running until the highway lights appeared through the trees. By the time he reached his truck, sirens were already in the distance. He drove, headlights off, gripping the flash drive so tightly it cut into his palm. Whatever was on it, people were willing to kill for. At 11:46 p.m., he pulled onto Route 8. The road was empty, the mile markers barely visible in the fog. When he reached number 42, he saw it, a small roadside chapel, long abandoned. He parked outside and stepped into the stillness. Inside the chapel, candles flickered along the walls. And in the center, a single laptop sat on the altar, its screen already glowing. A voice came from the speakers. Not live, recorded. Officer Reese. If you're hearing this, it means Ben didn't make it. What you have is proof of Blackridge's true purpose. But be careful, once you open it, there's no going back. The message ended. The screen went black. Then a single line appeared, white against the dark. You can't cage what built the cage. Reese stared at the words, his reflection ghosted on the screen. Outside, he heard the low growl of engines closing in again. And when he turned toward the window, he saw them, figures in tactical gear, moving through the fog. They weren't police. They were coming for him. The cage builds itself. Rain hammered the windshield as Officer Daniel Reese floored the gas pedal. The flash drive clutched in his hand felt like a live grenade, small, silent, but heavy enough to destroy everything. Behind him, two black SUVs sliced through the fog, headlights cutting across the empty Montana road. No sirens, no lights. Just the steady pursuit of men who didn't need badges. Reese veered off the main highway and plunged into the woods, tires spitting mud. His truck slammed through branches until it skidded to a stop behind an abandoned ranger station. He killed the engine, heart pounding, and listened. Silence, except for the hiss of rain and the faint whir of drone rotors above. He crouched low, slipping through the back of the station, flashlight trembling in his hand. Inside, the walls were lined with peeling paint and maps from another decade. A single payphone hung by its cord, dead. He opened his phone, tried to call the bureau agent who'd interviewed him earlier. No signal. When he looked back out the window, he saw them, three figures in tactical gear, sweeping the tree line with infrared scopes. Their movements were methodical. Professional. They weren't hunting. They were recovering something. Him. Reese ducked through a side door and moved deeper into the forest. The mud sucked at his boots. His flashlight beam danced across the trees until it landed on a narrow trail marker, a faint M8 carved into the wood. The same route number Caro had mentioned. Following it, he reached an old maintenance shed half buried under vines. The door was chained shut, but he kicked through the rotten boards on the side and slipped inside. The smell hit him first, oil, rust, and something chemical. On a table sat a line of old filing cabinets and a metal case marked property of DOJ, for internal review only. Inside the case were stacks of documents, stamped with the insignia of the Department of Corrections Intelligence Division. Photos, transfer orders, financial ledgers, and one chilling document titled Project Cage. Underneath the title, a sentence read, "Inmate data may be leveraged for behavioral targeting and domestic control simulations under federal contract." Reese flipped through the pages. It wasn't just Blackridge. There were at least 8 facilities across the U.S. linked to the same project, each running covert experiments on inmates, psychological stress tests, isolation endurance, digital tracking implants. All of it done off-record, under the justification of rehabilitation research. But one section made his blood run cold. It listed operatives. People embedded inside the prison system, chosen for loyalty and moral flexibility. Their job, silence leaks, erase data, and manage personnel anomalies. The first name on that list. Benjamin Caro, status, deceased, reassigned. Reese froze. Reassigned meant they hadn't killed him, they'd turned him. But toward the bottom of the page, another name stood out. Daniel Reese, status, pending assessment. He staggered back, pulse hammering. No. Footsteps outside. He killed his flashlight and crouched behind the cabinets. Voices filtered in, distorted through rain and masks. 2 heat signatures. One near the shed. Confirmed target Reese still active. They knew exactly where he was. He looked around desperately, eyes locking on a small trapdoor under the workbench. He yanked it open and dropped into a narrow crawl space just as the door above burst open. Boots stomped in. Beams of light swept the room. Check the files. Wipe everything. He held his breath as dust fell from the boards above. One of them knelt. We got the case. Uploading confirmation. Then came a short, metallic sound, a silenced shot. Paper fluttered down. When the footsteps faded, Reese crawled out. The case was gone. But the men had missed something, a single photo that had slipped under the bench. It showed the warden, Hale, shaking hands with a man in a dark suit. The caption read, Blackridge expansion contract signing, Sentinel Technologies. Sentinel. The private defense firm Caro had mentioned. Reese pocketed the photo and ran. By dawn, he reached the outskirts of a small town. He hid his truck behind an old diner and walked in soaked, mud-streaked, and shaking. The waitress gave him a cautious look as he sat at the corner booth. Coffee, he said hoarsely. She poured him a cup, but before she walked away, she whispered, You're being followed. Reese froze mid-sip. She nodded subtly toward the back window. Through the reflection, he saw it, one of the black SUVs parked across the street. He stood, trying to stay calm, and slipped into the restroom. He locked the door and pulled out the flash drive. There was a small laptop left charging on the janitor's shelf, probably used for the register. He plugged it in. A single folder appeared on screen. /vault/cage/Blackridge/. Inside, dozens of encrypted video files. He clicked the first one. The footage showed a sterile white room, a man strapped to a chair. The timestamp read October 12, 2023. The man was wearing an inmate jumpsuit, but not one from Blackridge. A voice from off-camera said, Begin Phase 2. Electricity surged through the restraints. The man screamed. Monitors flickered. Another voice, calm and clinical, added, Increase dosage. Record biometric feedback. Reese's stomach churned. He clicked the next file. This one was worse. Guards, faces blurred, forcing prisoners to fight in enclosed cells while officials observed behind glass. A label in the corner read, Stress Resilience Testing, Group Beta. Then a third file, Warden Hale, sitting at a desk, speaking to someone off-screen. The senator wants results before the audit. Tell the techs to push the next phase. If a few inmates don't make it, we'll log it as electrical failure. Reese sat frozen, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't rehabilitation, it was human experimentation. He pulled the drive and pocketed it just as heavy boots entered the diner. Through the crack in the door, he saw two men in suits scanning the room, flashing fake badges. He climbed out the restroom window into the alley, landing hard on wet asphalt. He ran, ducking behind dumpsters until he reached the street. He stole a parked motorcycle and gunned it out of town. As he sped down the highway, the rain broke and the morning light cut through the clouds. For the first time, he saw what was really at stake. Blackridge wasn't an accident. It was a prototype. And every prison in the country could be next. At sunset, Reese reached an isolated rest stop overlooking the valley. He parked behind a derelict trailer and finally let himself breathe. He connected the flash drive to his phone through a cable, recording a backup copy. Then he opened the last file in the folder. It wasn't a report. It was a message. Caro's face appeared, recorded weeks before his death. If you're watching this, they'll come for you next, he said quietly. I couldn't stop them, but you still can. Send the files to the contact in the note, she's the only one outside their reach. Her name is... Static. The screen glitched. Then a voice, not Caro, cut through. Deep. Cold. Officer Reese. You shouldn't have opened that. The file ended. He looked up. On the ridge above, headlights flashed once, twice, 3 times. They'd found him again. And this time, they weren't coming to capture. They were coming to erase. The silence protocol. The valley was quiet, but Officer Daniel Reese could feel death moving in the air. Headlights cut through the fog, gliding down the ridge like silent predators. He slipped the flash drive into his jacket, kicked the motorcycle to life, and took off down the narrow service road. Gravel sprayed beneath his tires. Behind him, 2 SUVs followed without headlights, their engines low and controlled. Whoever they were, they didn't chase like cops, they hunted like soldiers. Reese's phone buzzed once. Unknown number. A text appeared, you can't outrun what you're inside of. He didn't respond. He just rode harder, until the mountain road twisted into a tunnel. The walls shook with the roar of engines. Ahead, daylight, a small white circle at the end. Then the shot came. The bullet shattered his rearview mirror, grazing his shoulder. He veered sideways, nearly losing control, but he made it through the tunnel and out into the blinding light of dawn. At the end of the road stood a lone gas station, long abandoned, the kind you see on forgotten highways. Reese sped into the lot, ducked behind the building, and killed the engine. The vehicle slowed to a stop up the hill, their doors opening in unison. He counted at least 6 of them. All armed. All silent. Reese reached into his jacket and pulled out Caro's last note, the one that came with the flash drive. Beneath the scrawled words, "Send to her," was a name and a phone number. M. Adler, Independent Journal Archive. He opened his phone and hit call. It rang once. Twice. Then a woman's voice answered. "This is Marlene Adler." "Adler, my name's Daniel Reese. I have files from Blackridge Correctional. I know who you are," she interrupted. "And if you're still alive, you need to get to the airfield near Pine Valley. There's a pilot waiting for you. Bring the drive. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone." "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," she said flatly. "But if you don't, you'll be dead in 5 minutes." A single gunshot cracked behind him. The SUVs had arrived. Reese bolted, darting between derelict pumps as bullets tore through the glass. He fired back, a service pistol he'd taken from the glove box earlier, but his shots were outmatched. He sprinted toward the woods behind the station, clutching the flash drive like a heartbeat. Branches whipped his face. Adrenaline blurred the world into noise and light. By noon, the clouds broke, revealing Pine Valley Airport, a single airstrip and a hangar surrounded by nothing but open land. A small Cessna plane idled near the edge, its propellers spinning. A woman stood beside it, hair tied back, dark glasses reflecting the sky. Marlene Adler. Investigative journalist. Former war correspondent. Fired years ago after exposing a military contract leak that embarrassed a senator, the same senator whose name appeared in the Project Cage documents. She saw Reese stumble out of the tree-line, blood on his arm, and waved him forward. "You've got it?" He nodded, gasping. "They're right behind me." "Then we don't have time." They climbed aboard the plane. The moment the door shut, Marlene pushed the throttle forward. The Cessna lifted into the air just as black vehicles flooded onto the runway below, their tires screeching. Bullets sparked off the fuselage, but the plane climbed higher, disappearing into the gray sky. Reese looked down at the valley shrinking beneath them, smoke still rising from the gas station. "They won't stop," he said quietly. "They can't," Marlene replied. "If what's on that drive gets out, half the country burns." Once they leveled off, Reese handed her the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. Dozens of encrypted files appeared, including one labeled The Silence Protocol. "What's that?" he asked. She opened it. It wasn't a report, it was a contingency plan. A list of names, media networks, and compromised journalists. Below it, a paragraph outlined what would happen if the Blackridge project was ever exposed. All associated data will be neutralized through controlled digital collapse. Assets and witnesses to be handled under Directive 9. Activation phrase, Blackbird sings. At the bottom was an authorization signature. Secretary Thomas Hale. Warden Hale. He hadn't just been the warden. He was part of the Defense Department's Private Tech Oversight Board, using prisons as test grounds for population monitoring systems. Reese's throat tightened. He was running everything, from inside. Marlene's voice lowered. "They're not running prisons, Daniel. They're running simulations. Every inmate, every guard, every visitor, data points in an algorithm to predict human rebellion." Reese's jaw clenched. "And they called it rehabilitation." Before Marlene could respond, the laptop flickered. The files began to vanish one by one. "Wait, what's happening?" Reese shouted. "They found us," she said, slamming the laptop shut. "They've triggered the protocol." The plane's dashboard lights dimmed. Navigation went offline. Even the radios died. The aircraft dropped a few feet in turbulence as alarms screamed. Reese gripped the seat. "They're wiping it, and us." Marlene yanked out the flash drive, clutching it to her chest. "There's only one chance," she said. "There's a press drop in Canada, old server vault, off-grid. If we get this there, it's out of their reach." The plane dipped lower through heavy clouds. Reese looked out the window, black helicopters in formation, closing in fast. "Hang on," Marlene said, throwing the plane into a sharp dive toward a stretch of forest. The world became a blur of wind, screaming metal, and smoke. When Reese woke, everything was quiet again. The wreckage burned nearby, twisted in the clearing. He stumbled to his feet, coughing. The pilot's seat was empty. No sign of Marlene. Only the flash drive, half buried in the mud, still intact. He looked around. No helicopters. No voices. Just trees, endless and silent. He slipped the drive into his pocket and started walking north. Hours later, as night fell, he found a small ranger tower on the edge of the forest. Inside was an old radio, still functional. He tuned it to an open frequency. "This is Officer Daniel Reese," he said. "If anyone can hear this, Blackridge wasn't a prison, it was a system. And it's spreading." Static. Then a faint voice replied, barely audible. "We hear you, officer." We've been waiting. The line went dead. Outside, far below the mountain ridge, he saw dozens of small lights flickering in the valley, not headlights this time, but torches. People moving through the trees, in formation. They weren't chasing him. They were searching for something else. Then his radio crackled again. A recorded message this time, one he recognized. It was Warden Hale's voice. "You think you escaped the cage, Officer Reese? You are the cage. You're the final test. Let's see how far the data goes when it believes it's free." Reese froze. His hand went to his chest, beneath his collarbone. He felt something small. A hard lump under his skin. He ripped his shirt open. Embedded just above his heart was a faint scar, and beneath it, a microchip glowing faintly blue. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. He hadn't been investigating the experiment. He'd been part of it all along. The signal light on the tower blinked once, then again, sinking to the rhythm of his heartbeat. And miles away, in a secure server room somewhere deep under Washington, a technician smiled as data filled the monitors. Subject Reese, final sequence completed. Behavioral simulation achieved. Cage operational. They buried the crash story in a single line of local news: private aircraft lost over northern Montana. No survivors found. But 2 weeks later, a file appeared anonymously on a European journalist's desk. Untraceable. Encrypted. Labeled only. Blackridge, the truth they don't want you to see. And when she opened it, the first line read, "You can't cage what built the cage." If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because some prisons don't need walls.